Hello, can everybody hear me? All right, how's my hair? The mic guy, I don't know. Anyway, just kidding. So thank you so much for having me here. I am very excited to come and share what I'm very passionate about, and in just a little bit I'll explain why. So we all want to do a lot with AI and machine learning, and there is so much opportunity for us to do it, but we need to know how to do it right. And I'm going to talk about that today. So a brief overview. I'm going to introduce myself. I have a unique background of doing machine learning mostly, but somewhat AI as well, for over 20 years. I know I'm dating myself, but I promise. So then I'm going to talk about why AI maturity is important, and this AI maturity model that we have developed at UnitedHealthcare that has really helped us kind of visualize of what is it that we need to do to truly maximize what we can do with AI. And then I'm going to kind of give you a little piece of advice. I know it's unsolicited, but I'm very passionate about it, like I said, because it's important for all of us to, wherever we are, to increase the trust in AI. And really reap the benefits. And we've seen some great examples yesterday and today of what AI can do. And then I'm going to close with some of the summary. All right, so you have heard my brief bio. I have done just about everything there is to do in this domain. I started as a consultant, which really made me be able to explain what AI does, what's it going to do for the client, really be clear about the process and the results and the benefits and all of that good stuff. And it was before this was one of the hottest jobs, just so you know. This was 2 decades ago. And then I've continued working in a variety of domains. Most recently, I've been in healthcare. So I've done anything from hands-on data science to teaching data science, publishing research, applying for patents, to leading teams, building teams, leading teams, and then trying to get us all moving forward on the maturity journey. Okay, so briefly to unpack these jargon words, AI, ML, DL, what is it? So if we think about AI and machine learning, and believe it or not, I used to have stacked Russian dolls, and I don't use that anymore for obvious reasons. So my stacked robots, machine learning is a subset of AI. AI that's not machine learning, anybody knows? Planning, your maps on your phone, swarm intelligence, any type of intelligent agents, anything like that. So systems that learn from the information they collect. We can broadly say that's AI. Machine learning, on the other hand, is like having a very, very experienced colleague that has a huge memory, remembers everything, has seen a lot of stuff, and he can kind of utilize on that, learn from the experience of their data, right? So machine learning learns from your historical data from the experience that you have built in there and grabs all that good gist in there. And then deep learning is just another method. And just very briefly, data science. Data scientists use machine learning methods, such as deep learning and others, but it has a little bit wider connotations of, you know, they can write code, it's a little bit of high performance computing, databases and all that. It's a little bit more of a wider area. All right, so why is maturity important? So we're experiencing we're living the era of AI transforming everything that we do. So from having about 500 billion mark, hitting that mark by 2024 to becoming AI first world, AI is everywhere. The first thing you do in the morning when you grab your phone and check your email, AI is there. Your maps, as I said. You know, when you log into your intranet, you know, there is AI recommending where you should go and where you should see and where you should shop, right? So as we heard, about 13 trillion is expected to be added to the global economy over the next day. Huge, right? Huge opportunity. I don't have a slide, on the other hand, for all of those bad news stories of AI fails to deliver this percentage of AI is not being put in production, or let's see, that GPT said that Queen Elizabeth I was the United States president in 1600. So we don't talk about those, right? So what is it that makes some of these companies really maximize and become AI-first companies where AI is at the DNA of everything that they do? And what's the differences between those companies that are not really realizing the promise of AI? So what I'm going to talk about today is not just checking the box. A lot of companies are, they know they need to use AI and ML. It's about how do we do it right? How many of you have seen, not your current company, let's not put anybody on the spot, but how many of you have seen in your career a model that's never put in production and lives and breathes in a PowerPoint or Excel spreadsheet? We've all seen that. Or a model that's been put in a super fancy UI, it's a great model, but the business can't use it because they just don't need that. They just don't need that, so somebody didn't answer those questions at the beginning, okay? Or how about that model that's great, but at runtime, at inference time, when you're using it, it doesn't have all the inputs that it needs. We've all seen these whoopsies with AI, and so how can we avoid that? So there is something that we call the AI maturity model, and no, it's not a YAM, yet another maturity model. There are a lot of people thinking about maturity in all kinds of industries here as far as AI goes. It's really meant to be a recipe for success. So as far as the AI maturity level and revenue or business value that your AI would bring, we see companies being at one of these 4 stages. Piloting, somebody's tinkering at the side of their desk, they're applying some AI, or they're maybe operating, or they're productizing, which means they're really optimizing at the product level. AI is product. It's software 2.0. It's AI-enabled software. It's a software product that consists of AI within it, all those insights that your machine learning methods created. And so companies that are piloting AI, they can only obtain a limited business value from it. As a matter of fact, you can have negative ROI. You can have somebody tinker with something, waste time and money, and get 0 out of it. So what do we want to do? And why is this important? I'm just going to give a couple of brief examples. So these are my favorite. I call them the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this is all about COVID. We're living in the COVID era. And so there is a paper in Nature that talks about more than 300 flops trying to predict COVID-19 from really images, from skin scans or anything related to that. And the reason why is that there was a bias in the data, or a small size data set, or just the study wasn't designed just right, issues, right? And then one of them is my favorite, where somebody trained a model on, back in the early days of COVID, you guys remember that kids didn't get it, so they had negative images of COVID taken from the kids, scans, and positive from the adults, and their model was really good at predicting whether somebody was a child or an adult, right? So we can't do that, right? So why is this a concern? The biggest concern is that it has the potential to diminish the trust in AI. And why is that bad? Because believe it or not, wherever you're working, the news of a big flop was going to go high up really quickly and much faster than any of the good things that everybody else is doing, potentially, right? So we need to make sure that we know how to do it right. All right, so let's move on. So the good example of the good is that there was a company that did it right, has a wearable, it's FDA approved, and it absolutely can be done. You just need to do it right. All right, so what does mature AI or good AI really look like? Well, it's properly built. So some of those examples we talk about, those were technical whoopsies, right? it's properly operationalized, so it needs to go into prod. You can't reap benefits from any model if it's not in production. And then it needs to be properly consumed, so can the business use it? Do the people that are gonna use it, are they on board? You know, it has to be properly consumed, and then, really important, it needs to be properly maintained. And we're gonna talk about it. Okay, so if you do all of that, you have an organization that's operating at a velocity of your data, and you can really create this faster, cheaper, more accurate business operating model. All right, so let's look at the maturity journey. So there are really 3 main pillars in getting you there. So this recipe has 3 sections. First one is AI readiness. You need to have the strong talent. I am not against federated AI or citizen-led AI or anything like that, but there needs to be a disciplined approach to AI. Your talent needs to be good, needs to know how to deal with imbalanced data set, right? You can't use accuracy if your data set is imbalanced, right? Because you're gonna get a 99% accurate model, but the 1% of the interesting minority class is never gonna be predicted. So that's not useful. So you need to have strong talent. This assumes you have the right data and that you are not trying to do the impossible with AI. So within reason, if you have enough clean data and it's good data, you need to be able to get it, right? So you don't need to be spending 2 months trying to get to your data. You need to have data infrastructure and model infrastructure when you're developing. Okay, the next pillar is AI enablement. There needs to be strategic investment in AI, really important. You need to partner up with the business, you need to have leadership support. That guy, one and only lonely guy that's tinkering with something on the side of his desk is not gonna have, his model is not gonna have as much reach as somebody that has leadership support and is partnering with a business. There needs to be AI strategy, and super important, you need to have best practices, guidelines in place, and verification. AI verification is critical. Anybody can do AI, but let's have a disciplined approach to it. So before it goes into production, it needs to be vetted, okay? Why? We don't want to put something that's not ready for production into prod and diminish the trust of AI. And then, of course, fair and unbiased and responsible use of AI, very important. And we get to the trust in AI, right? We want to be at the, you had me at AI, I like to say. So you say AI and people believe in it. So really important. And then finally, AI as a product. There are 5 W's everybody needs to answer before they attempt to build a model. Who, what, where, when, and how will use your model? Will you have all of the features, the inference time? You need to have end-to-end capability, really important. You need to know where in the process that's gonna fit, how are you gonna get to your data. That's the good machine learning engineering part. Performance monitoring. So I've worked in healthcare for the last 9 years. When COVID hit, if we didn't have our KPIs defined in performance monitoring, we would have been in big trouble, okay? So really important to know what your live models, your models that are in production, are doing. And then also, every model has a shelf life, just like items in your fridge. In healthcare, that's on average 6 to 12 months. Why? Because the domain is really noisy and complex, so your models need to have a regular cadence of refreshes where you rebuild it on the most recent data. So, while you're doing your performance monitoring, you also are getting feedback as to how your model is doing. If COVID hits, or monkeypox, or the next thing, or something else, and you notice that your model is not performing as it should, that triggers it triggers maintenance that happens overnight, basically. Or you put in things in place to prevent the model from spewing out stuff that's not supposed to, right? So really important to have that in place. And then component reuse. If you're working as, it's a software product, if you can reuse some things, not every model can be plugged and played someplace else unless they're a language model, but you can reuse some of the really nicely engineered input features, or maybe you can reuse some of the methods that you created while trying to solve another problem. All right, quickly, AI readiness, enablement, and product. I've transposed that matrix, those 3 pillars, Piloting, applying, operating, and productizing. There is a huge difference between low and optimal as far as the AI readiness, and I'll just briefly flash this, and then as far as the product, AI pilots or AI products, a huge difference. And so what you get is you get a profound enterprise impact if you're doing it right, if you're checking on all of these boxes. All right, so readiness levels. We talked about it, who is doing AI, from weak talent pool to strong talent, modern data infrastructure and model infrastructure, and building an AI community. That's how you are optimally ready. If you're sharing is caring, and learning from each other, that's when you're at the optimal level. AI enablement, from no strategy, no governance, a big one, to having an enterprise strategy, knowing where you're going, establish governance and best practices, checks for responsible use of AI, which is a part of our governance process, but I separated it because it's so important, to building high trust in AI, having high trust in AI, and also very important, innovation, and try to disrupt with AI. I mean, that's what we're here to do. Can we bring AI and disrupt, completely transform something, one of the business processes, or more than one, of course. AI is product capability. Are you tinkering with POCs and pilots, or are you building a product and having a plan and answering the 5 W's and making sure you're maintaining it in a regular cadence, or your performance monitoring is triggering an instant cadence? And then also very important, inventory. Can you in large companies you get redundancy quite a bit. Do you know who's doing, has anybody built a model in a similar problem? Can you learn from them? Get some of the input features at least, or at least learn about their experience and get to market faster with what you're trying to do. All right, so where are most teams? All over the place. I've seen examples everywhere I went of teams all over the place. We want to be at the productizing level, of course, and this is how we can do that. So what you can do is use this model to assess where your team, your organization is. Try to utilize the model in all of those 3 pillars and different stages to move towards the productizing stage. That's where you're optimizing at the product level and really maximizing the benefit of AI. Employ quality safeguards. Make sure you vet any AI before it goes into production. Super important. Collaborate and share. It's more fun that way. And track inventory and reuse. All right. So briefly, what is AI maturity and why is it important? How well AI is done is directly related to the business value it will bring. Make sure you are properly building your AI, but also properly operationalize it, consuming it, and then maintaining it. Super important. You don't want your models to get stale or to drift or data drifts and then things happen, right? What you can do is assess and then improve. Work on those things that are lacking. And I really wish all of you, to be successful and use this as a recipe to getting there, if at all possible. And that continue on your AI journey to that productizing level. Thank you very much.